Welcome, welcome. This is Dr. Safiyya Shabazz, and I'm live at 96.1 FM, 900 AM, WURD Radio. I'm your host today for the Her Health Matters radio show, where we talk about the physical, mental, and social well being of the mature Black woman. Her Health Matters is full of understandable information from wellness experts who will provide us with valuable information and, most importantly, action steps for wellness. So let's embrace and celebrate all that is for the benefit of a Black woman's health and wellness for this next hour as we tackle the topic of maternal wellness and, more specifically, the role that doulas can play in maternal wellness. Just remember, although this radio show is focused on health and wellness, no information we present today should be considered medical advice. Please consult your physician before making any changes to your health and wellness plan. And lastly, although I am a doctor, I'm not your doctor. So, again, follow up with your own physician for any questions or follow up you may have to make sure it's the right fit for you. This show is produced by Community Hero Action Group, a nonprofit organization whose mission is to close health and wealth disparities within the Black community. To find out more about Community Hero Action Group, visit communityheropa.org. I'm feeling fantastic today, and I hope you are too. We've got the sun shining. We're going to start off the show today with our thought for the day, and we'll enter into today's Speak On It segment, where we will discuss maternal wellness, loss, and gaining control. Finally, we're going to end with our Let's Take Action closing segment to provide actionable steps outside of just listening to all the great information you're going to receive this hour to help you make more informed decisions about your health care and also sharing info and events about other activities related to today's topics. So, I always like to open up with a thought for the day and get us centered before we begin the discussion. And today's thought is about the fallacy of the strong Black woman. It's inspired from actress Taraji P. Henson, and I'm going to quote her. First of all, it is entirely impossible for any human to always be strong. I was always apprehensive of the term strong Black woman because it dehumanizes us and makes it seem like we don't hurt. So let's just pause for a moment and think about that because we've all heard the term strong Black woman, right? We probably even claimed it proudly. And as a Black woman and as Black women, we often adopt strategies like building up walls, doing more than what's healthy for us. And I'm notorious for this, refusing to ask for help, even when it's in our best interest. I'm sure we can all relate to this, so you're not alone. But it's important that we understand the gravity of how this affects us emotionally and physically. And there are preventive steps that we can take to shift us from the mindset and take action to engage with our everyday duties in a more healthy manner. This affects every aspects of our lives, like in the workplace, feeling like we have to do twice as much just to keep space at the table, in our community, like over volunteering, at home, where we tend to be in charge of making sure everyone else is taken care of. And lastly, most importantly, our own health and wellness, because we often don't seek help when we need to due to all of these competing priorities that I just mentioned. And we do that sometimes because we don't want to seem weak or we don't want to be a burden to other people. So we'll talk about this last point because it's a great segue to today's topic of maternal wellness. So before we talk about what steps we can take to take control, we have to acknowledge these forces that are at play, and we don't always have control over those forces. But in the United States, we realize we have the highest maternal mortality rate of any developed country. And the maternal mortality rate is higher than it's been in decades. According to the CDC, Black women are 3 times more likely to die from a pregnancy related cause than white women. There's multiple factors contributing to this, including the quality of healthcare, underlying conditions, where you live, structural racism, and implicit bias. Um, so there's just some statistics we could throw out where, depending on where you live, the mortality rate can vary widely. So in California, they have the lowest maternal mortality rate at 4 deaths per 100,000 births, and Louisiana has the worst at 58 deaths per 100,000 births. Here in Pennsylvania, we're in the middle, on the low end of that range, but somewhere in the middle at 18.6 deaths. I don't know how you get a point 0.6 death. Let's just say 19 deaths per 100,000 births. And of course, we all heard the story about Serena Williams, who gave birth and felt like she was being ignored about what she was experiencing in her body, and it almost cost her life, and cost the world a few more years of watching her greatness. She was prone to blood clots and developed trouble breathing, and she really wasn't listened to the way she should have been, and she was able to advocate for herself, and she's thriving and healthy, and so is her baby, but not everybody has that kind of outcome. So we're going to talk about getting additional support, what advocacy for ourselves looks like, and what it looks like when we hope to lead to better health outcomes. So let's just get this conversation started. We're going to talk about maternal health laws and taking control with today's guest from CocoLife.Black. This organization was created to provide a safe space to celebrate Black moms who are expecting, affirm those navigating postpartum, and offer support to those moms who've experienced the loss of a child or a significant loved one. Our first guest, Alexia Doumbouya, one of the founders and also president of CocoLife.Black, holds a master's degree in organizational leadership and is certified in mental health awareness and as a postpartum doula. Alexia has appeared on various domestic and international platforms like iHeartMedia and has been quoted by CNN and the CDC, to name a few. She's a change maker and a leading voice on the social determinants of health. Our second guest is Erica Lynn Cotton. She is also a founding member of the organization and is also the founder of Beauty Over Ashes, which is an organization that provides support for mothers, children, and young widows. Erica Lynn is also a certified breastfeeding counselor. So, welcome to Her Health Matters, ladies. So glad to
Greetings. Good
have you.
morning.
Hey, hey.
So, we're going to start with you, Alexia. Why don't you tell us more about your organization and how you got started?
Sure. Thanks so much for having us on. Thanks for opening up your platform in this space to this so important, delicate but necessary conversation. I would say Coco Life started out of the women that you see before you today, quite honestly. When specifically, though, I remember back in, I want to say it was like 2018, 2019, I was kind of reflecting on my experience being pregnant for the second time, postpartum depression, perinatal depression and anxiety with my first child, and just having experienced the recent loss of my mom, probably a short while before that, I'm looking around and walking past a mirror, and I'm just like, I feel so alone. I think the biggest the biggest void that I saw was I knew that there were a lot of resources probably out there. I just didn't want to say nothing existed, but it was really hard to find. So I thought about my own experiences again with pregnancy and loss and just struggling. And then I thought about the stories that I had heard of friends and family alike. And I was like, you know what? Okay, I think there's something here that we could do. Fast forward, COVID-19, the pandemic specifically hits, and we decided that that was the best time to launch a new organization. And so we set out together with a couple other Coco moms. When I shared the idea with them, they were like, "Yep, I love it. I want to be a part. Come on, let's go." Just like that. And we all were able to pull the gifts that God had given us together, and start to form this platform. And that's what Coco Life really was started about, as a platform centered around simplifying access to these necessary resources like doulas, and birth workers alike, in addition to financial literacy, strategic coaches, whatever that is. We wanted to create an ecosystem. And then what that started to birth as time went on is this Mombassador movement, that we've been on in this
I
journey.
like that term,
Yes.
Mombassador.
Come on, mom ambassador. And that's everyone. Like, we define mom as, yes, absolutely, if you traditionally birth a child, but however you're mothering in your community, from god mom to church mom to dads to aunties to uncles, we have spaces for kids. And that was the goal. Our three pillars to support of pregnancy, postpartum, and compassion came. And I know Erica Lynn will talk a little bit about the more about the compassion piece, but that was the goal, is like, we're going to launch this movement, and we are promoting a community empowered model of care. So we know that all those statistics that you name, some of them are related to social determinants of health, some of them are race related. And so we know that where a community, that it takes a village, where that is realized and more present, we are more powerful for that Coco Mom. So that's kind of where CocoLife.Black came from.
I love it. I did want to also hear more about doulas and also loss. But let's just start with the topic of doulas. I'm somewhat familiar with the term, but could you explain to me and to the rest of the audience what is a doula?
Sure. So we know it in our community as, the person who has been there since the beginning of, I want to say, not since you realized that you were pregnant, right? And you said, okay, I'm having this baby. Way back when, the ancestors know doulas as that woman, that person that was a part of your journey. So from the time that you found out you were expecting, all the way through labor, delivery, and then even being able to support beyond that. But oftentimes, what we read about is it coming as a Greek word, but really and truly, it's a form, it's a person who comes in that obstetric experience. So she, and then some, he, now we see a lot of doulos who have started to come, and we partner with an amazing organization that has a ton of them. But we have started to see that become more of a professional position that is held. Now, specifically, I think what's important to highlight is a doula is a non-medical position. So
Okay.
just like you said, it's not medical. Now, you do have some doulas or doulos that may deliver babies. They, especially if they do home births more often, but really we are there to be that companion. So I always define the scope of a doula, SCOPE, as to support, to be a companion, to organize, prepare, and educate. And
Oh, that's
we
great.
come along, yes,
Scope.
scoop of a doula. And so we come along, medical professionals like Erica Lynn, who is also a who is a registered nurse and who has been in women's health. We come alongside midwives, OBGYNs. We are in that space specifically for the mom. Oftentimes, many of the medical professionals in that space, they're there to make sure we get that baby. They're healthy. And yes, they are worried about the mom. They want to make sure she's good. And so that's where the partnership comes in,
Right.
is for us all working together.
I was going to ask that what the difference is between a doula or doulo and a midwife. It sounds like there is some level of overlap, but if you could elaborate.
Yes, yes. And the midwifery model specifically. Now, you do have some that don't go through medical training, but where you see midwives occupying the space in a hospital, and like what Elle and Erica Lynn is familiar with working with, and one of our Coco moms, Michelle Lamar Suggs, she's a midwife, and so they are typically registered nurses who have gone on to receive this additional certification, licensing, it may be, Elle, you can correct, in that space of midwifery. Now, you do have a lot of other midwives, though, that did not take that track. The thing is, though, they're not able to work in a hospital setting. And as it relates to how we would identify a medical resource, they're not necessarily considered medical. So I think
Mhm.
that's where you probably see more overlap. When the midwifery model first started into existence, again, looking back in our generation, our ancestry, it was a woman who did the delivery piece of it, who brought forth the life in the baby. And they were, at that time, there was no licensing or certification built around that model. And it was Black women predominantly, that occupied that space, especially when we talk about transitioning over from the continent into America and needing to take care of enslaved people, enslaved women. And so what started to happen as time went on is, in an effort to take over that space, we saw a
Mhm.
lot of non-Black people coming in and starting to require midwives to become nurses. And so them having to
Oh.
turn in their midwifery, if you will, their identity as a midwife, if they did not want to go through the path of a formalized or trained nursing model. We still believe in the need of it, and we applaud those who choose to go that path, especially the medical, because that's where we need to see more of them show up in that hospital space. But I think that's why you kind of see some overlap. I remember even in the show Queen Sugar, there was this use of terms interchangeably, like a doula or a
Mm.
midwife. And that's because, again, way back when we saw midwives delivering babies, and then also that terminology of a doula, they were delivering babies too. So, and still do some to this day, I'll say.
Fun fact, both of my children were delivered by a midwife.
There you go.
Um, but is there a cost associated with having a doula? Like, does insurance cover it?
So, interestingly enough, um, I'm gonna say just a simple blanket quick no, insurance doesn't cover it. It's not a covered benefit. However, specifically in PA, Medicaid will offer some reimbursement
Hmm.
for such services, but you do have to be certified, and you have to come under a practice that already has kind of like a Medicaid assignment, if you will, and able to
Okay.
do it. But you could not just, have a doula and that be a covered benefit like under your traditional plan, unless you have a provider that chooses, or a plan that chooses to incorporate that, which is something we're working on. But in answer to your question, it can be an expense associated with it, but that's where Erica Lynn and I, and a lot of our other mom ambassadors have been coming together for those who need support in doula services, you will, mental health services, all of those things, we subsidize that cost for them. And so, as a doula myself, I will do a lot of pro bono work, if you will, to try to help reduce and make sure there's some support there. And while I tend to lean more towards the postpartum side, I work with a lot of other birth doulas, who will do the same. And then there's birth education that we're constantly offering. But yes, some doulas, myself included, if people do elect to, they can pay for that service. And the price usually just varies a little depending on if you go have a birth doula, and or a postpartum doula.
Okay. So, Erica Lynn, we haven't uh, heard from your perspective just yet. Why? I mean, this sounds like a great service. Why? I guess cost is probably something that's playing a role, but why do you think more people don't use doulas?
I think there is a lot of miseducation surrounded with doulas, and a lot of people just don't know they exist. Specifically in the Black community, um, a lot of people have never heard of a doula before. A lot of people may not know what a doula is. And to Alexia's point earlier, people use midwife and doula interchangeably, and so they assume that if, like in your situation, how you had a midwife deliver both of your children, they're like, oh, she has a doula. but really you had a midwife, and as did I. And so I think there's a lot of misinformation about what doulas are, the role that they play. And honestly, as a Black woman who's pregnant and giving birth, like, you kind of want a Black doula, and the Black doulas know each other, but a lot of patients don't know Black doulas. And
Mm.
so even in the hospital setting, like, I worked at a local hospital here in Philadelphia, and there were not a lot of Black doulas who would do the deliveries with us. And so before I knew of this network of, brown doulas, I probably wouldn't suggest a doula to any of my friends, because I know how intimate that setting is, and that we need representation and people who look like us, who understand certain things about us without us having to explain it. And so I think that in the Black community specifically, we don't know a lot about doulas, and we don't know much about doulas who look like us. So it's not something that we actively seek out, which is why CocoLife.Black exists, right? To show that there's a whole network of Black doulas out here, and let's do something to help you acquire one.
I think it's great. I don't know if you realize this, but even though I've never done this since I finished residency, family physicians are trained to deliver babies as well. And so I've spent lots of time on the delivery floor and have delivered babies. And I can't say that I can recall ever being in a delivery where there was a doula present. I don't think so. Not that I can recall. And this is
Yeah, a
right
lot of
in Philly.
Oh, I was going to say, a lot of hospitals, most hospitals who have midwives will have a doula network, but if they don't have midwives, they most likely won't have doulas who come. So it
Mhm.
kind of goes hand in hand, because of the type of model that midwives operate in. They actually encourage having a doula versus the fully medical model that doesn't include midwives. So you'll see that
So are
more.
doulas just involved during childbirth or
No, they're involved from the time most of the doulas who I work with, they want to see you once you become pregnant, because it's a whole layer of education. What things should you do during your pregnancy? They may just offer a lot of services while you're pregnant. And so it's pregnancy, delivery, and then postpartum. So they're there for a really long, they like to be involved for the whole process.
okay, great.
Yeah, and I would
So
just add, if I could,
uh,
just to add
mhm,
to that too. Now, to Erica Lynn's point, as we've started to become more informed about the importance of the entire care team, is what we start to refer to it as, right? That entire care team, which includes your doulas, a midwife, your doctor of obstetrics or OBGYN, your labor and delivery nurse, your mental health provider, your nutritionist, like that's where the ecosystem comes in. But you will hear about many types of doulas. Like there's even bereavement doulas. There's that full spectrum doula. When you hear that language, it's usually a doula who does both birth and postpartum. And if you talk to most doulas, they do occupy that space. But like anything else, you tend to have like a sweet spot, if you will, that you work
mhm,
in. And so that's where you'll see that separation of a birth and postpartum doula. And I'll say that's also, to Erica Lynn's point, the education that we're seeing come and the opportunity is because
mhm,
if you have heard of a doula, you only think about it as birth. You So the postpartum doula, and I don't know if you all remember or saw the woman who was like ostracized. She put up a TikTok talking about how she had a postpartum doula. She mentioned about it being covered, but her coverage of insurance was more like a from a SHA perspective or health savings account, using it that way, or she
mhm,
may have had a plan that covered it. But the biggest piece that she was ostracized about was having a postpartum doula and investing in having that resource. And
mm,
so many people were like, well, why would you spend that money on someone? You could have used that money for something else. You could have brought your family in to help you. And so one, that is not always an option for people. I want to just place that. That's the whole message around the it takes a village. And even if it is, guess what? There's a lot of responsibility to hosting family in your home too. You
right.
still can feel convicted about them being there, so you want to make sure they're comfortable. You don't want to overuse them or abuse them, and so we don't ask as much. But when you delegate that work out, a postpartum doula is there specifically for you as the mom. If there happens to be any other additional support that you need throughout your family that may be in the house, sibling care, whatever that looks like. And then, especially when we talk about our moms who or dads who have experienced the loss of a significant loved one, their loved one who helped bring that child into this world, you
Mm.
absolutely need the support of that doula. And so,
Right.
again, going back to just the whole example of different ones, even abortion doulas. I know
Mhm.
oftentimes that's a subject that we kind of stray away from, but given the
I know
recent
that could
conversation,
probably be a whole talk
that's a
in
whole other
itself.
conversation. So yes.
So, if someone were interested in finding a doula, let's say I want a doula, where do I look, and what types of questions do I need to ask this person?
That's a great question. Both. And I'm going to start the easiest place you can look is at
Local life
CocoLife.Black.
stuff.
Got it.
And that is not only the name. So organizationally, we have two arms. Coco Bump, which was our original name, that is kind of like our for-profit side that we use to do a lot of education and fee-for-service type work, if you will. Coco Life Foundation is our 501c3 nonprofit, but we refer to it as CocoLife.Black. So that's kind of like our AKA or doing business as, if you will. But it's also the website. And so that's where you can kind of start your search if you just are like, I don't know where to go. We have been able to invest a good amount of time. And thanks to one of our Coco moms, Nyla, who has been working diligently with our ambassador, Courtney, to get the resource page up and going. You can go there and you can search for doulas and birth workers, and again, all those other resources. So that's one
Okay.
place. There's a lot of other great partners out there that we have, like Wolami, Birth. What is the one L that has the equity around birth workers when they go into the space of maternal health, if you will. I
Um,
can't. The name is leaving me right now. Um, but we
but
have a network. We're gonna
yeah,
put that in the
yeah,
resource page.
yeah.
But
Okay, great.
yeah, but there's a couple of different places that we work with too, but you can start there. Now, questions that you can ask, I'll say this is honestly why we wanted to host this doula mixer, because there are a lot of questions. And so one thing that you want to ask, sometimes people will say it started with like, how many births have you attended? That's important, but more I guess, open-ended question that'll get you your answer is what kind of experience have you had both as a doula? And then allow that doula to share with you, because that's the piece, right? Ask open-ended questions of
Mhm.
any person that you're working with. Ask them whether it's a doula or you're going into the medical space, if you decide to use a midwife or going with the OBGYN, how do you, especially as a Black and brown person, our numbers are significantly higher as it relates to disparities in maternal mortality and morbidity. What do
Mhm.
you do specifically to help reduce those numbers and improve those outcomes? Because that's an open-ended question that if they don't know or if they haven't, then they can kind of speak to it, but it allows them to allows you to get some insight. You absolutely want to ask if there's a pricing model that's included and what does that look like, and what does payment look like if that's the case. If you are looking to have services subsidized for you, you can ask, do you work with any partners that would subsidize this, that would reduce this cost for me?
That's a
Because
great
if they
question.
don't, as a doula especially, that's kind of like a tingle, like, maybe I need to get connected with a network that can help me out here. Do you have a backup person? That's a really good question, because you'll, especially from a birth side, I mean, things happen and these babies come when they absolutely feel like it. And so it's just nice to know that you're a part of a network. Asking to, I think the last thing I'll mention, because the list can go on, but those are some of the most popular ones, is also being able to find out what the postpartum experience looks like, especially if you went into it only thinking about birth. That we talked about the different styles. And so if you ask that question, then you make it, I'm actually, I specialize in birth, but I do work with postpartum, or I am full spectrum, but let me check and see what my calendar looks like if you want postpartum care too.
Okay. Well, this is great for the audience. You are listening to the Her Health Matters radio show on WURD 96.1 FM and 900 AM. We're here with Alexis Doumbouya and Erica Lynn Cotton from CocoLife.Black. And so, what is your organization currently working on now? I feel like you mentioned about a mixer. So, just tell us a little bit more about what your organization is working on now.
Well, we just finished. So excited. So, as we transition into the fourth quarter, we had a lot going on. But one of the things we just finished celebrating the 2nd of October was our first annual Beauty Over Ashes Gala, which was hosted by Erica Lynn Cotton. And again, that arm, we have to highlight the importance of it because it does support our compassion project. And so when we talk about Beauty Over Ashes, it is a scriptural reference to it, Isaiah 61 and 3. And so there's a space that we occupy, particularly as Black and Brown moms, where loss is just a regular part of our existence. And you talked in the beginning about the fallacy of a strong woman. And so, what we have set out to do through this entire process is to shift that from a mindset around strength, because actually, to think of yourself as strong is a weakness, and more so occupy this space of resiliency. And so that's the language and the lifestyle that we want to promote. So that was one event that we have another event coming up for World Mental Health Day, which is hosted by our Coco Mom, our Healing Coco Mom. And it's through our writings on the wall, the mixer that we were talking about coming up in November. But for October, again, next Saturday, we will be honoring the space of loss, because October is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. But specifically on October 15th, we'll be hosting our third annual International Day of Compassion. We come together on a platform similarly like this, on our YouTube channel, and we open up that space to talk about that loss, including infertility and what that journey looks like. The mixer, though, coming up in November, we're going to do it virtual. Next year, we plan on doing it as an in-person, but it's a space where we will bring together all birth workers, and specifically, though, to highlight that space of doula. And we are inviting moms and dads who are expecting or maybe recent postpartum to talk to doulas and do this. I have some questions. So almost think of it like a speed dating type of concept where you're coming in and you're meeting doulas and you're asking questions around that. We have a mom lounge that we're partnering with Enon for on November 13th or November 12th, in person, and we are going to be taking some time to do some group support. We got a bump boutique. So those are a few things for the rest of the year. And next year, I think that we're excited about our first signature event for the entire scope of Coco Life, which is going to be our mom mixer, benefit mixer, which stands for Maternal Outcomes Matter.
Okay, that sounds like a whirlwind of activities, and all of which people, I'm sure, can find on CocoLife.Black.
Yep.
So that is wonderful. Again, we're talking to Alexis Doumbouya and Erica Lynn Cotton from CocoLife.Black, an organization dedicated to providing support to mothers who've experienced the loss of a child or significant loved one. And I wanted to kind of um, talk more about that aspect. Doulas definitely are a welcome addition to a pregnant woman's birthing team for the additional support. And being a mother is arguably one of the most cherished moments of a woman's life. And we often feel defined as a woman by whether or not we've achieved this goal and how well we handle motherhood. It is a reflection of how strong we are, but we do suffer loss and we do need help. You mentioned at the top of the hour that you had experienced loss. How did you cope with it?
In a very unhealthy way back then, because I wasn't as informed. And so, and what it looked like in that very unhealthy way was to withdraw. and to put on that superwoman cape that has, we talk about, it has been burned, destroyed, clipped, all of that. No, thank you. You can have it back. Return to sender. Um, and I just powered through. And my loss looked in a couple of different came through a couple of different ways. One was through an elected termination. And so when I had the miscarriage after that, I allowed myself to believe that that was my punishment, if you will, and that I had earned that miscarriage through the decision that I had made, regardless of why I made that decision. And so at that time, I would have never spoken about it, had never spoken about it. It wasn't until Coco Life, and honestly, a year ago when we did our second annual Day of Compassion, that I allowed myself to verbalize it and say that I forgave myself for it. And so burying myself in my work was something I knew a lot about. I'm really good at that time with putting on a mask. So I knew how to step in front of people and portray everything that everybody wanted to see, because I think that's the other piece of loss, is that not all the times, even when we say, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How can I help? Because people don't always know what to do, they don't know how to handle it. And so we will sacrifice ourselves, especially again as Black women, Black moms, will sacrifice ourselves and push it down because we don't want to make others uncomfortable. So that was how I navigated that space at that time.
And that really, I feel like we need to go back to it because I can imagine tons of women having that same reaction that you described, where because of whatever had happened in the past, and you're electing to end a pregnancy, that you felt that that was somehow your punishment, or you deserved it. Like, I that is a burden that would is an awful one to carry, and one that I feel like I've heard it before from
Mhm.
women, just in the course of my work or just interactions with women. So I wanted to kind of go back to that so people can like throw that back to wherever it came from. And I guess maybe generally talk about a more healthy way, and emphasizing like how you would handle things differently, or reframing that in another way.
Today, a better, a more evolved, a more connected um, with myself, and appreciating God for the journey that He's allowed me to do. And so this comes transitions why we talk about that beauty over ashes piece, and it just resonates so well here, because what I know now is, one, to not allow myself to withdraw, to seek out my community that was around me, that village that was there, to allow them to help me. And it was one of a Coco mom friend of mine who saw when I was going through some of the challenges, particularly with postpartum depression, that was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And she was like, "Yeah, you're not," and really kind of called me on it. And you can't back away from that. And I'm like, "Oh shoot," she asked the follow-up question. Like, we usually we can
Right.
stop right there. And they're like, "Okay," but then she came with the follow-up, Coco mom. And so really allowing my community support me, leaning into mental health professionals. Now this whole household is in therapy. And it's not one of those things that we take like, oh, we got to go because there's a problem. We are a mess. We are beautiful, for we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and we are a mess. And so it is important for us to be whole in ourselves. And in order to do that, you got to do the work. And so that doesn't
Mhm.
happen overnight. And that's where that whole compassion piece expanded. When we first started talking about pregnancy, postpartum, and compassion for the loss of a child, it was looking through that lens. Like, if you had
Yeah.
ever lost a child, whether it was pregnancy, infant loss, ectopic pregnancy, whatever that looked like as far as your loss, we wanted to make sure we created space for that, because we wanted to provide a healthy place where Black women can come and where they can have support. And guess what? Even non-Black people that have reached out to us for support, we've helped. Like, we make sure we're very intentional about that. But we also know our need in our community. But what
Right.
started to expand is, as Erica Lynn went through her journey and we got connected, we saw through her loss, which was different than just the loss of a child, she lost a significant loved one. And that is where we said, Oh my, yes, we have to
Right.
make sure that we don't lose mom. So that is our pillar, is we are not going to lose a mom. And especially we are not going to lose a Black mom. We're going to do
Right.
everything that we can.
So, Erica Lynn, if you could talk a little bit more about that, about compassion care and where someone could get help if they experience a loss.
So I think that one of the things that's unique about Coco Life, and even back to Alexia's point about making sure that we allow our village in. For me, I didn't have a labor and delivery doula, but I had a postpartum doula. So that was very, very important in my journey. A little bit of my background dealing with loss is that when I was 7 months pregnant, my husband passed away. It was our first child, and he like just had a blood clot travel to his lung and spontaneously passed away, 32 years old. And so I
Wow.
was pregnant with our first child. Like, I worked in labor and delivery, and I had two early miscarriages in the past. So from the scope of working in labor and delivery, dealing with moms who have had losses, we didn't tell anybody that I was pregnant because I saw almost every single day how sometimes pregnancies can end in the loss of a child. And so my fear, my entire pregnancy was, I've already had two early losses. At 17 weeks pregnant, they were going to do emergency surgery on me. So I don't know if I'm going to lose this baby. So every day I woke up thinking that today was the day I was going to lose my pregnancy. And when I was 7 months pregnant, I ended up losing my husband instead. And so when you go through a traumatic loss like that while pregnant and working in the field of knowing that like you could still lose this pregnancy at any time, it's a lot for you to handle mentally. And I delivered her at the hospital that I worked at. So it was great to have that community. I was privileged in the sense that I worked there. I was a nurse there for years. So, you know, my midwife, my nurses, my doctor, everybody, I knew them. So there was that sense of community. And having that experience, I think, is what really is a benefit to Coco Life. Just having my professional experience as a registered nurse and knowing what moms need in that time of whether they lose a pregnancy or whether they lose a loved one. Like, unfortunately, I know what both things are like, right? But
Right.
it's to our benefit when it relates to this organization, because I'm able to reflect on those times of where was I at mentally, what things benefited me, what things were not great for people to do and say, and you know, and we take those experiences and we navigate it in a way that's going to be able to benefit those who experiences those types of loss. So for me, like Alexia said, therapy, like, and it makes sense, right? Like, oh, your husband passed away, like of course you're in therapy, but this point, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be something wrong. I started therapy because, yes, my husband passed away. And then I realized that I had all this childhood trauma and things that had been affecting me for
Right.
years. And we talk about things like from childhood more than we talk about me actually losing my husband. And, you know, just understanding how our world and our life really affects the women who we become. And then it affects the parents that we become. And
Right.
trying to, um, just navigate those things. And you know, to our point earlier of that strong Black woman, and that's why resilience is key, because in my opinion, strength represents like something is strong, so whatever happens to it, it bounces right back off of it, it's not affected by it. Whereas resilience shows that something happened, you were affected, you were not okay, but you were able to overcome through certain things that you did. And so I think that's why the compassion piece of CocoLife.Black is really, really important, because we highlight like how do we support these moms who have experienced grief and loss as it relates to the loss of a child and also the loss of a significant loved one, like a partner being in the home. And so to have a
Right.
postpartum doula meant the world to me, because not for nothing, I had my daughter in February and in March the world shut down because of COVID. So now I'm
Wow.
at home. I have
And
trauma from
and
like the
experiencing a
spontaneous.
new trauma.
Right. And
So,
so I'm nervous to let anybody in because of this virus that no one knows about. But I have this amazing postpartum doula who like comes in and she helps me with all of these things that honestly, if my husband were here, I still would have needed a postpartum doula, right?
right.
Because to Alexia's point, family, they're great, but there is this other burden of making sure that they're taken care of when you're still a host if your family comes in. But if you have
Right.
a professional who's coming in and their sole responsibility is to make sure that you're okay and your baby is okay, it literally takes that load off of you and allows you to be able to do the things that you need to do. And
Right.
so that's why the compassion piece of CocoLife.Black is so important, because we need to be able to help the entire woman in all the different experiences. For example, Alexia lost her mother. So now having this second child, she can compare experiences when she had her daughter, her mother was here versus now she has her son and he's not, or, whatever other family member it may be. Those
Right.
losses affect us in many different ways. So it may not be a husband, but it can be a parent. It can be, whatever other loss, because we understand in our Black community, our cousins are like our sisters and our brothers. Our grandparents are like our parents. And so we have a different dynamic culturally as it relates to family that we have to be sure to include and to consider when it comes to raising a family.
Right. So, we just thinking about all of the social pressures. How do we remove the stigma of it being okay to need help?
I think that we just have to continue to tell ourselves that, right? And so when COVID happened, it was this buzzword of self care, right? And there was
Right.
this thing like, we need to take care of ourselves. And I think that that movement was very, very important because it showed us, like, oh my goodness, I actually don't take care of myself. And when we think of self-care, initially we would think like get my hair done, get my nails
Right.
done, but that's actually just grooming. I mean, it makes you feel good, right? But those are just like grooming practices, right, to
Basics.
make us look acceptable. But when you really think of self-care and taking care of self, both mentally, physically, going to the gym, working out, like to eating the right things, it's very important that we continue to just think about taking care of ourselves and letting each other know that it's okay, because we come from a generation of women who didn't take care of themselves, and it was
Right.
normal and natural for them to like overwork, stress themselves out. Oh girl, I did it, and I didn't have help from this person or that person. And like you said, we hold it as a badge of honor to like not need
Right.
help and to
I'm
not,
every
but
woman.
really like,
Hmm.
no, and we not though. So like we have to get get rid of that mentality of we can do all the things and we can be all the things, because you end up burned out, and then there's this other generation of like traumatized women that we're raising,
Right.
and it's not okay. We're perpetuating those same cycles. And so
Right.
for us in this generation to say, okay, it's okay to need help. It's okay to need a break. It's okay to take care of yourself. It's okay to say no as a complete sentence, and you don't have to give a reason why you're saying no. Now our children can see us doing it, and they're growing up
Right.
as emotionally intelligent women so that they're able to do the same thing. So it's that cycle of getting in relationship with a healthy community who understands the same thing, and then also teaching the generations above us, like, no, I'm
Mm.
not doing that, and you don't need to do it either. So you gonna sit down with me
Right.
and we're gonna watch this show
And
together.
I think a few things to answer the question, removing the stigma of needing help, you remove it. Like, right? So when something is in position physically and it's a barrier and you want to get it out the way, you remove it, you pick it up and you move it. And so in order to do that, we have to do that. And so to Erica Lynn's point, a few things that the language now that we can start to incorporate is communal healing. So that's one of the ways that we can remove the stigma, is to heal from the intergenerational trauma that has been passed down. Like this didn't just start a generation or two ago. This predates us, and I'm not just talking about slavery or those that time period. This is even in the history of us as a people. Whether you talk about the kings and queens or the sharecroppers, we have passed down certain practices that have not been the best for us. Now, when you place into these time periods, then those moments of slavery and Jim Crow and what we see happening even today, with with police brutality and a lot of these things, as a community, we have to heal. But in order to do that, you got to start to recognize that there's something to heal from. You're
Right.
never going to try to heal from something that you don't believe exists. So, in removing it and being able to show it too through our actions. So, most of the things that we now, as a millennial generation, I think we started to introduce that concept of boundaries, which is what Erica Lynn was talking about, right? Like, no is a complete sentence, as she said, or that's actually more than what I can handle. Can I get some help with this, whether it's in the workplace, the workspace, or at home? It's
Right.
important for us to not define ourselves by the things that we do on our own. I saw a post someone put up, I think a few months ago, and it was like, well, I didn't have any, support in this area. I didn't have a trust fund. I did everything on my own. And we like, yes, 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 you did it on your own. Like Erica Lynn said, no. And my counter to
Right.
that was, we're going to stop doing that. We're going to stop glorifying carrying this backpack on your own versus us sharing it together. So when we start to recognize, one, that that is not a healthy way to build community, is to make people believe the lie that you did it yourself, because no one does, then
Right.
we can start to introduce concepts that really are more progressive and allow us to evolve into a healthy community. So
Right.
that
And I
community,
think what you're describing really is part of, our specific question or our specific topic about doulas, but it really is so much bigger than that. I mean, maternal health and maternal mortality is such an important part of our health as women, but also our health as a community. But when we normalize the fact that we all need help and that we should ask for help, if that help is in the form of a therapist, then we need to normalize that. If that help is in the form of a doula, then we need to normalize that. So this has really just been eye-opening, I not just for women, just people in general. So many topics we could go in so many different directions from, but this has been enriching for me as the host, and I'm sure that the information you're providing is landing on each and every person in their own unique way. So, how can someone find out more about your organization and get in touch with you for services and support?
they can visit us online at www.CocoLife.Black. CocoLife.Black is also our Instagram. CocoLife.Black is our Twitter and our YouTube and Facebook. So really CocoLife.Black everywhere, okay, is where
Okay.
they can find us. And there's options all throughout the website. If you go to our services and support tab, then you're able to find out more about the Mombassador movement, our compassion project with Beauty Over Ashes, doulos, how to get involved if you want to be a support. And I think that's the biggest piece that we would want to leave everyone with is become a mom ambassador. We use the term mom ambassador, but know that that's you in all of your excellence, in all of your gifts and your talents that you have been given to be able to support this space. If everyone may have been familiar with, even if you didn't watch it, the Hulu documentary Aftershock. And one of the things that Coco Mom Shawnee said on there was that when a Black mom dies, there's an aftershock that ripples throughout the community. And that's the same thing that goes with a mom's life being lost, a Black man being murdered in the streets, a child not having enough food and food insecurities in communities. All of those things have a ripple effect. And so when you become a mom ambassador and when you take accountability for how you, just you, serve in your community, that
Right.
absolutely has an effect across the globe. And it will make the entire world better when we take care of ourselves and give back to our community.
Right. That is what came in my mind when you said that was 1 ounce of truth benefits like a ripple on a pond, where,
Yeah.
you start with
Mhm.
yourself and it's like a ripple on a pond. So Alexia, Erica Lynn, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your stories, your triumphs, and information to help shift the maternal health in the Black community. And really, when moms are healthy, our whole community is healthy. We learned so much. For links and resources mentioned in
Mhm.
this episode, please visit communityheropa.org/radio. And as we close, there's so much rich information, but I just want to summarize and leave us with some actionable steps. Of course, we want to visit CocoLife.Black for more information. Even if you're not pregnant, you may know someone who is, and you can share this valuable resource with them. Continue to do your research. You can reach out for reliable sources, and this is one of them. So you can learn more about doulas and the maternal mortality rates and what we can do to begin to change that. You mentioned, Alexia, the documentary Aftershock on Hulu that's co-directed and it's co-directed by Tonya Lewis Lee about this crisis. And it doesn't just speak about the issue in a general sense, but also highlights real women who have experienced the loss of a child during childbirth, or those partners who are no longer have their significant other, the motherless child, and families really that are forever changed when these losses happen. And lastly, as part of Community Hero Action Group's ongoing Building the Block initiative, we encourage everyone to be informed and also engaged, which includes voting every 6 months. There's a primary and general election every 6 months, and the next election is coming up. There are a lot of different ideologies out there from a lot of different candidates that can affect a woman's health directly. During this show, we've discussed many of the alarming facts about the deaths of Black women and health inequalities. It's important that we have public officials who are going to take these issues seriously and create laws and policies that address these issues. So we have to do our research. It's critical, absolutely critical that when you vote, you evaluate your interests and vote in your best interests. The last day to register to vote is October 24th. The last day to request a mail in ballot is November 1st. And of course, November 8th is the next general election. So we want to be sure we are building the block by showing up at the polls. So, any final thoughts in 30 seconds? Erica Lynn, 30-second final thought.
I would just say yes, definitely take charge, take action. Visit us at CocoLife.Black for more information just on the things that we are doing in the community to help our community and help to empower our community.
And Alexia, your 30-second parting thoughts.
Just thank you so much again. And just continue to look for ways that you can empower yourself and empower others.
That is great. Well, thank you, thank you, thank you uh, to you both for coming on the Her Health Matters show. I'm your host, Dr. Safiyya Shabazz, and that wraps up this episode of the Her Health Matters show. Until next time, be healthy, be you, because your health matters. Peace.